Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Yamuna Tira Vanacharya. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Brahmhang Sabrivadakasharya Asadhara Satushi Sriman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribol. Glorious to the sound devotees, all glorious to Shri Guru and Shri Garanga. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Shri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Bacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Siddharne. So thank you for coming today. I'm going to read from a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, which is called The Divine and Demoniac Nature, text number 9. Now this may appear to be rather not so encouraging verse, but then again, it's actually very relevant to the time that we're living in. It's obvious that one time Prabhupada was in Mayapur on a morning walk, and he started to talk about the next world war at that time. This is 1975. And the devotees were quite surprised because growing up in America, or those who live in America, imagine that by technology, by industrialization, by computerization, we're going to live a very comfortable, unending, progressive life of material sense gratification. And if you don't like this world, if there's any problems, they're going to give you a headset, a virtual reality, and you choose whatever reality you want to live in forever. So this is the idea of modern civilization, that if you don't like the reality of birth, death, old age, and disease, that we're going to put you into a computer program and you'll live forever in your digitalized form. But this is called imagination. And I think that currently throughout the whole world, at least some people are waking up that this progress, so-called promise of progress through technology, computerization, industrialization, was never real to begin with. So this verse explains about that. That's why I thought it would be appropriate to read it today. Although it may not, for a society that's grown up in Disneyland with Twinkle and Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and Never Never Land and The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy. Therefore, it's not so palatable to hear about the wicked witch of the West. But this is about the wicked witch of the West, to counterbalance Dorothy. So this is text 9. Etam drishtim avashtabya nashtatmano nabuddhya pravatnugra karmana shaye jagato hita. Following such conclusions, the demoniac who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. So that conclusion is that there's no God. That's the conclusion of the demons. There's no God, and there's varieties of that conclusion, or that we're all God, or God is love, or God is impersonal, etc. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, the demoniac are engaged in activities that will lead the world to destruction. The Lord states here that they are less intelligent. The materialists who have no concept of God think that they're advancing. But according to Bhagavad Gita, they are unintelligent and devoid of all sense. They try to enjoy this material world to the utmost limit and therefore always engage in inventing something for sense gratification. Such materialistic inventions are considered to be advancement of human civilization. But the result is that people grow more and more violent and more cruel to animals and cruel to other human beings. They have no idea how to behave towards one another. Animal killing is very prominent amongst demoniac people. Such people are considered to be enemies of the world because ultimately they will invent or create something which will bring destruction to all. Indirectly, this verse anticipates the invention of nuclear weapons, which the whole world today is very proud. At any moment, war may take place, and these atomic weapons may create havoc. Such things are created solely for the destruction of the world, and this is indicated here. Due to godlessness, such weapons are invented in human society, and they are meant for the peace and prosperity of the world. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Sadharane. If we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll find out that Kali Yuga began approximately 5,000 years ago. And although, according to modern historians, civilization only began a short time ago, but actually the history of this world, the history of the universe is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That not only before 5,000 years ago was there civilization, but there was actually civilization. One time, Gandhi went to England, and when he was in England, they asked him, "What do you think of English civilization?" And Gandhi's reply was, "I think it would be a good idea." So though somehow or another we've been conditioned to think that we're living in the midst of a very advanced civilization, but this is not according to the standard of the Vedic culture. Vedic culture judges the civilization by how people treat each other, how they understand the relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore in relationship to Him, how they relate to His creation, which happens to belong to Him. Modern civilization has been taken over by a class of people who are intent in removing God from the picture entirely and replacing it with all kinds of crazy theories, such as Darwinism, Freudism, Machiavellianism, so many different demoniac, materialistic, impersonalistic Vedistic philosophies. Now, the reality of civilization existed when the majority of the people were living simple lives. Simple lives doesn't mean unconscious lives. Simple lives means that, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, anad bhavati bhutani, that all living entities, they actually subsist on food grains. The most important thing in the world is proper food, proper air, clean air, fresh water, nice relationships, peaceful life. This is actually human civilization, not computers, electric cars, atomic weapons, Facebook. These are not, in themselves, symptoms of advancement of human society. They're the symptoms of human society as becoming misdirected, what the actual goal is. That the goal of life is Yagya Vishnu, that people should like Krishna. They shouldn't give us likes, they should give Krishna likes. But people don't know about Krishna, Nitevidu Swartha Gatimi Vishnu, and therefore they become busy trying to create their own empires. As if we're going to be happy having our gross and subtle bodies as the center of other people's existence. But actually, existence is when one can live life in such a way as not to make it overly complicated, unnecessarily complicated, in the attempt to become something we're not. In other words, as Prabhupada said, this whole human civilization, which is meant to keep people in darkness, will soon come to an end. And this is 1975, real civilization will actually manifest itself again. Kali Yuga began when Shringi, a Brahmin boy, cursed Maharaj Parikshit to die within 7 days. That more or less signaled the end of Brahminical culture and the end of real Kshatriya culture. Brahminical culture is meant to give people vision so they can understand what the purpose of life is. And Kshatriya culture are the arms that make sure that the purpose of life is carried out within human society. But when these two most important aspects of society, Dharma and Moksha, were eliminated, what was left was a lot of Shudras, people in the mode of ignorance, and a few Vaishyas who turned into cheaters. The cheaters and the vast majority of the cheated. And the first thing that they did was start animal slaughter, especially killing the cows and the bull. Why did they do that? Because that's what demons do. Demons are wanting to exploit the material nature, and therefore whatever Krishna says, that they do the exact opposite. It's like when the demons and the devotees were churning the ocean of milk, Krishna first of all told the demigods to grab the mouth of Vasuki, because he knew that as soon as the demigods grabbed the mouth of Vasuki, the demons would immediately want to have the mouth also. So the demons complained, why are you taking the mouth and we have to take the tail of Vasuki, the snake? So the demigod said, all right, you can take the tail. You can have the head, we'll take the tail. And the Vasuki, who was breathing out fire, scorched the demons. So in the same way, cow protection means protection of the mode, and Brahminical protection means protection of the mode of goodness. protection of the Shastra, protection of Krishna's instructions, how to live simply and progress spiritually. Because I remember the first time I went to New Vrindavan in 1969, Srila Prabhupada was there. And when I was there, I spoke to Kirtananda. At that time, he was a Maharaj. And he told me that Prabhupada said, New Vrindavan was a very small community at that time. There's only maybe 10 devotees living there on a hill, in a very small house. But Prabhupada was teaching them that for economics, all we need is a little land and a cow, and then our economic problems will be solved. In other words, if somehow or another we can get proper food, proper shelter, proper water, proper air, proper relationships, then our economic problems are actually solved. Industry pollutes the air, pollutes the water, pollutes people's minds, causes people to work in undesirable occupations, complicated occupations, and at the end of the day, all they do is want to get some food. And the food is not very healthy either nowadays. In other words, when there's no Brahmins protecting, giving proper knowledge, there's no Kshatriyas making sure that the Vaishyas are protecting the cows and the people, then the so-called Vaishyas turn into what's known as Naradamas. And they wind up exploiting the cow, exploiting the land, exploiting the people, all for their idea of dominating this material existence. But when we exploit the cow, we exploit the bull, we kill them, and we eat them, then the result is we have to eat after some time. Because if we don't know how to plow the land with the bull, how to take the fertilizer from the cow and from the bull and utilize it to fertilize the land, then the result is these asuras, they invent all kinds of things. They invent their own medicine, they invent their own agriculture, they invent their own system of warfare. They simply invent everything for the detriment of human society. For instance, nowadays they have genetically modified food, they have all kinds of pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and peoplecides. All for the idea of substituting for the natural fertilization that comes from the cow and the bull. The cow plowing, the bull plowing the land, fertilizing the land, and therefore in their absence, they have to invent new methods of obtaining food. If there's no bull plowing the land, then they need tractors. And when they need tractors, they have to have industry in order to manufacture the tractors. In order to run the industry, you need oil. In order to get the oil, you need huge boats transporting the oil. In order to transport the oil, in order to get the oil, you need huge mechanisms of drilling into the earth to get the oil, refining the oil, transporting the oil, building machines, unlimited machines. And then you have the tractor plowing the land, impacting the land so all the organisms within the land are crushed. And therefore you need chemical fertilizer, which further burns the land and destroys it. And therefore the demons come up with the idea that there's too many people on the planet, and we have to get rid of them because the resources are limited. Because of their demoniac economy of killing the cow and bull, therefore they eliminate production and cause all kinds of economic problems. And in order to keep the people happy, because they don't get proper food, they don't get proper air, they don't get proper water, they don't get proper philosophy, they're born into a culture of atheism and voidism. To keep them happy, you need movies, you need sports, you need phones to play games with, just to divert their minds from the real problem is that they're working hard for nothing. So the solution is, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, Krishna has given us the solution, is that the only real economy, the only economy that's sustainable is actual simple living and high thinking. Now we've come to the point where, under pretext of some kind of pandemic, people are being forced for what appeared to be just like a simple cold and every season flu. Now people have lost their jobs, they lost their livelihood, they lost their health, they lost their aspirations. So this is also part of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's plan, so that people will give up this false idea that they're going to be happy in the material world and that technology is going to save them. Although it may take some time, eventually people, those who have some intelligence, those who have some proper understanding, will go back to cultivating their own food, protecting the cow, and trying to make their lives perfect by developing their consciousness, by raising it ultimately up to the platform of Krishna consciousnness. In society distracted by Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, by the ice, what was that, the Ice Queen or something? There's some ice princess or something. What's that? Frozen. Yes, people's minds have been frozen. They're more meditating on spiders, people becoming spiders, and bats, than they are upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna he's decided to change that around, to burst the bubble of materialistic illusion and come back to a more realistic situation that, believe it or not, milk doesn't come out of a carton in the store. It comes from a cow. The example is given, there was one Brahmin. He was a very simple Brahmin. He didn't have very much, but he was very highly elevated in consciousness. All he had was one pair of underwear called kopans. But one day he was by the bank of the Ganges, he was bathing, and he washed his kopans, his only pair of underwear, and put them on the bank of the Ganges to dry. Unfortunately, one mouse came and stole the underwear. So that was quite embarrassing for the Brahmin. And so he needed to get another pair of underwear, which he begged. Luckily, he obtained another pair of underwear, but then he was always in anxiety about the mouse problem. In Vrindavan, there was a pandemic of mice. So he decided to solve the pandemic, and he got a cat. But the cat started to make these strange noises, so he inquired from the other sages if they understood what the cat was saying. And the sages, being very learned, told this Brahmin that he's saying, "I need some milk." So the Brahmin inquired where milk comes from, and he found out it came from a cow. And therefore he begged one cow. So now he had a cow which potentially could give milk to the cat to protect his underwear. Unfortunately, he was not very technically, he was not very good at technical things. He didn't know how to milk a cow. So he further inquired. He found out there was one lady, she was super expert at milking cows, so he married her. So now he had a wife, he had a cow, he had a cat, and there was milk so he could protect his underwear. Later on, the lady wanted some children, so he had to get a house. So now he had 2 children, a house, and a wife, a cow, and a cat to protect his underwear. But then he had to get a job to pay for the house. In order to get a job, he had to get a car. And in order to get a car, he had to work at night. So now he was working 2 jobs, day and night. He had to pay for the car and the house, to provide for the children and the wife, and so that they can milk the cow, so he could give milk to the cat to protect his underwear. So after some meditation, after deep thought and meditation, he renounced his underwear and walked away. So modern civilization has made everything so complicated, and people have become dependent on the 2 jobs, the cow, or the house, the car, the wife, the children, the cow, the cat, in order to protect our underwear. Now, of course, house, wife, children, these are not wrong. They're part of civilization, but they're not simply there to protect our underwear. They're meant to assist us in becoming conscious of Krishna. That when modern civilization simply makes itself more and more complicated and gives itself credit for its complications, creates problems, and then, as Prahladananda said, their very means of solving their problems create even more problems. For instance, in 1900, the Ford Motor Company put out advertisements all over America that right now on the road there are so many horses, because that's all they had was horse and buggies. But these horses are passing stool all over the roads and contaminating the road. But we have a solution, that we built these cars, and if you buy a car, you'll end the horse pollution problem. So indeed, the horse pollution problem, at least in Brooklyn, has been solved. But some other problems have arisen since then. And it's all traced back to unnecessarily making things more and more complicated. Of course, it is not that immediately we're going to revert back to an agrarian culture, that everyone's going to get a cow and a little land, because we're just not used to it. But at least by chanting Hare Krishna, by taking part in pure devotional service, instead of losing our intelligence and glorifying a complicated, misdirected society, which is encouraging people to become more and more dependent on a false economic system, like this paper dollar. This dollar and God we trust, they don't trust God at all. And nowadays we don't even trust the dollar. The dollar is becoming more or less, I remember when I grew up, we had silver dimes, 10-cent pieces. They're actually worth something. But now they eliminated, the silver dime is not silver anymore. The gold-based dollar or the silver-based dollar is based on nothing. It's not even worth the paper it's printed on. For instance, in the Weimar Republic after World War I, they had to pay reparations to the other governments. The German government had to pay reparations, which means they had to give back something for their destruction they caused in World War I. But the Allies had put such heavy taxes on the German people that it was not possible to pay it back. They didn't have the economics to pay it back. So what they decided to do, since it was supposed to be paid in Deutschmarks, they started to print up enormous amounts of Deutschmarks. So many Deutschmarks that in order to buy a loaf of bread, you needed a wheelbarrow worth of money. So people would go to the store bringing a wheelbarrow worth of money in order to get a loaf of bread. But when they got to the store, there was so much money in the wheelbarrow, they couldn't bring it in immediately. So they had to bring in their money partly at a time to pay for their loaf of bread. When they brought in the first amount of money to the store, people would come and steal, not the money in the wheelbarrow. They take the money out of the wheelbarrow and they steal the wheelbarrow. Because the wheelbarrow actually was worth something. So I remember when I went to Peru for the first time, there was one Peruvian dollar. It was called peso, Peruvian peso. There was 1 peso to $1. But then by the time I left Peru that year, at the end of the year, there were 3 million Peruvian pesos to $1. And I went to Chicago, I did book distribution for a month, and I came back and they changed the Peruvian peso to the Peruvian Inca. And there's 3 Incas to $1. And by the time I left the next year, there were 3 million Incas to $1 again. I remember one time Jayapataka Maharaj told me he went to Bolivia and he initiated some devotees, like 20 devotees there, and they all gave him dakshin. He got I forget how many hundreds of millions of Bolivian dollars. And he cashed him in and he got $20 back for it. Which was quite good. I mean, I was doing buses in Peru. I spent the whole day doing the buses. I collected something like, I forget, 100 million Peruvian pesos, and that was worth $3. The economy was such, one time Jayapataka Maharaj and myself, we got an escort to go to the airport in La Paz, from the temple in La Paz. The police came and gave us an escort. But halfway there to the airport, our car ran out of gas because the police detachment, the motorcycle detachment that was assigned to us, didn't have any gas, so they siphoned off our gas so that their motorcycles worked. So we only got halfway there and they drove away. So that was South American economy at that time. So of course, we may imagine that these things can't happen to us because we're in the land of the free and the brave. But obviously things like that can happen. A lot of things can happen that we would be very surprised about. So the point is, real economy is not based upon people just printing money up out of nothing. And if you don't like it, we have our army that we go over and teach you the 10 Commandments. That we liberate you by sending over our armed forces to liberate you from your misconception that you're not supposed to give donations to the land of the free and the brave. No, America may have a very powerful army. It may convince some people for some time that you should supply all our necessities because we're printing up paper dollars and you should accept them because if you don't, we'll liberate you of all your misconceptions. That may work for some time, but it's not going to work forever because ultimately even people may not accept after some time that the all-powerful dollar is actually so all-powerful. And the result of that is that the economics of just free money, just by printing it, may disappear after some time, and we may have to become responsible for real economics, for where actually our food comes from, what is actually valuable in life, that endless production of iPhones and cars and computers and cameras and movies and entertainment and sports. This will all gradually come to an end, and we'll have to get back to the basics, like cultivating the land so we can get food to eat, and developing our consciousness so we're not distracted by these unnecessary materialistic entertainment, which ultimately comes down to the same thing over and over again. Even in the movies, it's just some glorification of eating, sleeping, with a heavy emphasis on mating and defending. But when these things come to an end, well, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy of chanting Hare Krishna, worshiping the deities, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, like the culture that they had in India some years ago, will again become prominent, and all over the world people will be glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And instead of working hard for meaningless objects, for toys, as they had one bumper stick in America, whoever gets the most toys at the end of life, they win. For all these technological toys, so we can sit on our computer and kill imaginary things as if we're making progress by doing so, that will come to an end. And the real necessities of life will become obvious. The real goal of life is to develop our consciousness. Human spiritual consciousness will become again prominent, and then society will live happily and peacefully and make actual spiritual progress in life. So though it's going to be a little painful, because every child doesn't like to give up his toys, when the child is at the beach manufacturing his sandcastle before the waves are going to come and wash it away, when the mother and father come and take the child by the hand to take him home, the child starts screaming, "I'm not going to give up my sandcastle, I'm going to sleep here tonight." But the mother and father take him away, although he's very unhappy, but he would be even more unhappy if he was there when the sandcastle got washed away by the waves. So the waves of time are going to take away all our toys, our sandcastles. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his assistants have come to lead us by our hands back to the real world, where we can actually be happy and do something really productive rather than waste our time with all these useless toys. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Maharaj,
yes.
Why did Krishna put devotees and the demons in the same place, where demons are aggressive and devotees? Couldn't he just set a separate place for devotees? Separate the demons?
Well, first he has, are you referring to where? Well, the question is, where are the devotees? We're aspiring to become devotees, and therefore Krishna has given us an opportunity. How much do we really want to become devotees, and how much do we actually want to take the side of the demons? It's not so easy to become a real devotee. After all, if you become a demon, you get a new iPhone every year. And if you're a demon, you can imagine that your children can dress up as Batman and Spider-Man. They can become normal. They can play their video games and kill the dragons in the dungeon all day long. So the question is, how much are we actually devotees? How much are we willing to accept Krishna's culture, Krishna's economics, Krishna's medicine, Krishna's everything? How much are we really willing to believe that Krishna is the proprietor of everything and that he knows everything. He knows how to keep healthy. He knows how to subsist in this world in the most practical way. How much do we actually believe that and accept it and live according to it? So Krishna is going to encourage us by, as we see so-called civilization crumble, to understand that this was not actually what we were told it was. That the bright new future of technology is not as bright as we may have imagined it to be. That it's going to wind up. It was never meant for the health and well-being of the people within it. It was meant for the control of a few to bewilder and misdirect the many. So if there's some who can actually understand what the real goal of life is, what the real direction is, what the real style of life should be, then we could say that Krishna will give them all protection in order to create real civilization. And those who want to stay around and hope that even when civilization collapses, at least we'll get iPhone 25. And it'll have so much memory that we won't need any memory anymore. It'll be so fast, it won't matter how slow we are. Everything will be all right. As a matter of fact, although there won't be any food, there'll be food so real, so virtual, that it's almost like we're eating. And although we may starve to death, we'll starve to death with a virtual full stomach. So those who actually believe in this conception, they may not be so much inclined to fully surrender to Krishna, or surrender to Krishna as much as actually necessary. So Krishna is giving us this opportunity. We can believe in this modern society that there's just a little blimp in the progress towards endless sense gratification, that now it takes 5 minutes for the pizza person to arrive at our house, and soon it'll only take 2 seconds because it'll be transported to our house by technology. So those who believe in this ever-growing advancement of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, they may not be so much inclined to accept the more simple way of life, which is the only real practical, viable way of economic development and ultimately Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, people would just waste their time paying off their credit card to get more and more technological things, which will never lead them to the goal of life. Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Prahladananda.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the realistic explanation of what's going on around us.
Yes, it's all for the betterment of create a real society.
Somehow we miss it actually what's going on. We are so much in the magic of it.
Yeah, we're imagining that there's a few demons that are doing this or that, or there's some pandemic, but actually it's all part of the bigger picture. It's all meant to bring about the golden age. This economic system will just collapse, just fall.
So I was thinking, are we ready for this society?
We may not be ready, but some will be.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Radha Govinda Radhe Jaya Radha Govinda Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ। জয় প্রভুপাদ। গৌর প্রেমানন্দে হরি হরি বল। পরম করুণ বহু দুই জন নিতাই গৌরচন্দ্র। পরম করুণ বহু দুই জন নিতাই গৌরচন্দ্র। সব অবতার সার শিরোমণি কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। সব অবতার সার শিরোমণি কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। নিত্যানন্দ আর গৌরচন্দ্র কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। সকল অবতারে অবতারী রাম নৃসিংহ বামনাদি সকল অবতারের অবতারী। মৎস্য কুর্ম বরহ আদি সকল অবতারের অবতারী। সব অবতারের সার শিরোমণি কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। ভজ ভজ ভাই চৈতন্য নিতাই সুধীর বিশ্বাস করি। ভজ ভজ ভাই চৈতন্য নিতাই সুধীর বিশ্বাস করি। বিষয় ছাড়িয়া সে রসে মজিয়া মুখে বল হরি হরি। একবার মুখে বলো গৌর হরি। একবার মুখে বলো গৌর হরি। বিষয় কথা হরি হরি মুখে বলো গৌর হরি। সকল অবতারের অবতারী রাম নৃসিংহ বামনাদি সকল অবতারের অবতারী। I don't know how to play this thing. You can play? Try. রাম নৃসিংহ বামনাদি সকল অবতারের অবতারী। সব অবতারের সার শিরোমণি কেবল আনন্দ স্কন্দ। ভজ ভজ ভাই চৈতন্য নিতাই সুধীর বিশ্বাস করি। বিষয় ছাড়িয়া সে রসে মজিয়া মুখে বলো হরি হরি। একবার মুখে বলো গৌর হরি। একবার মুখে বলো গৌর হরি। দেখো রে ভাই ত্রিভুবনে নাই এমন দয়াল দাতা। পশু পাখি জুড়ে পাষাণ বিদরে শুনে যারো গুণগাতা। আমার মন প্রশান্ত গল্ল না রে সুমধুর গৌর কথাই আমার মন প্রশান্ত গল্ল না রে। সংসারে মজিয়া রহিলি পড়িয়া সে পদে নাহিল আস। সংসারে মজিয়া রহিলি পড়িয়া সে পদে নাহিল আস। আপন করম ভুঞ্জায়ে সমন কহ হে লুচনা দাস। Okay, play something maybe better tal, okay? Okay, this one I don't even know how to play chord tal either. This one is typical music. Okay? Sundara lala, Sachidulala, Nachato Shri Hari Kirtan me. Sundara lala, Sachidula. You play chord tal, let me see. I'll play for you. This one, look. I know how to play this one, maybe. Hopefully. Sundara lala, Sachidulala, Nachato Shri Hari Kirtan me. Sundara lala, Sachidulala, Nachato Shri Hari Kirtan me. Bale Chandanam Tilak Manohara, Bale Chandana Tilak Manohara, Alok Shobhe Kapulan me, Alok Shobhe Kapulan me. Sundara lala, Sachidulala, Nachata Shri Hari Kirtan me. Shire chora barsi wale, shire chora dorsi wale, bon phul mala hiya par dhule. Shire chora dorsi wale, picture. Shire chora dorsi wale, bon phul mala হিয়া পর ধুলে পহিরন পীত পটাম্বর শোভে নূপুর রুনু ঝনু চরণ মে পহিরন পীত পটাম্বর শোভে নূপুর রুনু ঝনু চরণ মে সুন্দর লালা সাচিদুলালা नाचत श्री हरि कीर्तन में सुंदर लाला सचिदुलाला नाचत श्री हरि कीर्तन में राधा कृष्ण एक ही तनु है राधा कृष्ण एक ही तनु है মৃদুবন মাঝে বংশী বাজায় রাধা কৃষ্ণ একই তনু হ্যায় মৃদুবন মাঝে বংশী বাজায় বিশ্বরূপ কি প্রভু জি সহি आवत प्रकट ही नदिया में विश्वरूप की प्रभु जी सही आवत प्रकट ही नदिया में सुंदर लाला साचिदुलाला नाचत श्री हरि कीर्तन में कोई गायत है राधा कृष्ण नाम कोई गावत है हरि गुण गान कोई गावत है राधा कृष्ण नाम कोई गावत है हरि गुण गान कोई गावत है राधा कृष्ण नाम कोई गावत है हरि गुण गान मंगल तान मृदंग रसाल बाजत है कोई रंगन में मंगल तान मृदंग रसाल बाजत है कोई रंगन में सुंदर लाला साचिदुलाला नाचत श्री हरि कीर्तन में सुंदर लाला साचिदुलाला नाचत श्री हरि कीर्तन में। थैंक यू प्रभु। निताई गौर शीतनाथ प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल।